to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester podcast. We are a community built on love, hope, and justice. Our goal is to inspire people to take on the challenges of a changing world. Each week we'll bring you a reflection from our minister, the Reverend Aaron Payson, recorded during our Sunday service. Maybe it'll move you, challenge your thinking, or even stir up a little righteous indignation. That's all welcome here. Thanks for listening.
This week, instead of previously prepared remarks, Reverend Payson took questions in the moment from members and friends of the congregation, either in person or online, as well as offering a couple of questions to members and friends himself, an event annually known as Preaching Without a Net. All right. You know, if we're going to do this question thing, let's do it. All right, anyone got cards to hand in this way? I'll mix them all up. No one will know. I promise. Anyone else? Anyone? Anyone? You got plenty here, there. Anyone else? Have I forgotten anyone? I'll stick it in the middle here. Whoop. Thank you very much. I want you to know that my wife got me this shirt for Christmas as a reminder. So she's the one who's got all the answers, so let's be clear, mine are just temporary. Someone went about typing questions. Actually, I have questions that I need to, so let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, I've got 4 questions. Who wants a question? Huh? Oh, no. I would never hazard that. Who else? Anyone? Got one more. Bruce? There we go. All right, so here we go. First says, just because someone defines themselves as Christian, it does not mean they embrace the message Jesus shared as their guiding principles for how to be. Help us understand the various types of Christians and why some are so seemingly judgmental, rules-based, and more than willing to want to control others or actively hate others. So my short answer to that question, because that could be an entire semester-long study, is that Christianity took a turn in 325 AD. And it is the year that Constantine became emperor. Not the year that Constantine became emperor of the Roman Empire. It is the year that Constantine converted to Christianity, right? And it is the year that we see a turn that takes place where Constantine has the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. It's an interesting debate that goes on in Nicaea. It is the debate between whether Jesus is the same as God or similar to God. And it hinges on the smallest letter in the Greek alphabet, homoousios versus homoousios, right? I'm looking at all of my minister friends here who remember having to grind this into ourselves. But what's fascinating is that this is where prototypical Unitarianism begins, because Unitarians at the time, and they were called Unitarians as a way of marginalizing them, right, believed that Jesus was similar to but not the same as God, higher than humankind, lower than God. Others saw Jesus as the same as God. Now I want you to think about, prior to that time, the primary imagery of Christianity was imagery of paradise. If you go back to the earliest frescoes in the earliest basilicas of the Christian world, you find very few crosses. After that time, however, you discover that the cross starts to take symbolism. And part of the reason for the transition is this. When Constantine converted to Christianity and therefore wanted the empire to become Christian, it was a means of usurping the power of religion in service to the status quo of the political state. And what began as a mission to create paradise on earth becomes a mission to sacrifice one's selves for a larger purpose, namely the state. Right? Anyone see that continuing to happen at all in the world right now? So it seems to me that we continue to deal with that, and part of the question of, why do certain Christians, are on one side of this and others, I think you can point to that period of time where you see a division in Christianity, and you can see lineages within Christian congregations on both sides of that particular chasm. Right? Those who operate out of an ethic of Jesus who says, no, our job is to companion those who have been marginalized. It is to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, right? Give alms to the poor, or make the poor first is really where he goes. And those on the other side of it who see that fundamentally Christianity should be a harbinger for whatever political state is in power. That's the short answer. I'll try to do longer answers in the future. When does time invested in talent turn into treasure? It's an interesting question. I think for me, my time invested in talent turns into treasure the moment that it impacts someone else in a positive way. In other words, the moment that what I am doing has an impact. Last night at 2:30 in the morning, I'm sitting there in the quiet of a shelter, and one of the guys walks up to me to show me all of his scars. He was not sleeping, and talked to me and began to cry, actually, about what was going on in his life. And it turned out that he was weeping because no one had ever listened to him before. 2:30 in the morning, he needed an ear, right? That's when that shift takes place. It is those holy moments when we give the best of ourselves to a world that's so often hurting, and just live in that moment. The words that kept coming to me were, "You are okay. You're in a safe place. You're okay, and you will get through this. We will get through this." What are your hopes for the congregation in the new year? I want the congregation to understand just how vital it is. We live in a world where so many congregations are really, really struggling. And we have our own struggles, yes? Right? Ain't nothing like so many other congregations that have had to close, or who are trying to figure out where all the children are, right? Who are trying to figure out how to keep the place afloat. We have resources that other congregations don't, and I have colleagues that surround me, as well as all kinds of leaders who have done this. We are a vibrant congregation. My hope for the congregation is that we live into that vibrancy, right? That we find more resources to do the things that we want to do, and that we find ways of being able to serve our community that are meaningful for each of us. One of the things about congregations is, I learned this early in ministry, is there are really two types of congregations. There are congregations that train people to serve the congregation, right? And there are congregations that accompany people into the essence of the service that really speaks to them and what they want to be in the world. That's the kind of congregation that I want to minister. I want you to feel as though you are invested in things that are meaningful to you. And as long as we're doing that, I feel like that our mission is substantive. How can we take care of ourselves when the future looks dark? I take that question to mean that it's hard to find the energy to take care of ourselves when the future looks dark. I also realize that we're still in the darkness of the season, right? I don't know about how many of you experience SAD, right? Seasonal affective disorder, but it's hard to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps during this particular time. And I, for one, think that what's most important is that you not isolate, right? The surest way into the realm of that kind of darkness hole is to continue to pull further and further away from others. And I'm not talking about having to get into large groups of people. I'm talking about finding those relationships that are meaningful to you and nurturing them. And I've often said, if you want to change the world, you begin with what's within your arm's reach, right? So many of us experience what happened yesterday in Venezuela and immediately want to jump in and do something, want to be something. And my response is, operate in the realms in which you have influence, right? Go to those places where you can make a difference. It is only when we're able to actualize ourselves in those places that we're able to create other movements of solidarity and grow power in a way that allows us to see meaningful change on the largest scale possible. But if we leap from our sphere here into there, we go alone. So gather with those who give you meaning, right? And give you hope, and move forward. Who's got one of my questions? Bruce?
Oh, is it on? Is it work? Okay. Okay. So what's one change you'd like to see in this church?
Always ask a minister's spouse this question. Just saying.
Right. As many of you know, I've been a church youth group advisor. I think this is my 22nd year of doing that. And one thing that we've wrestled with on and off over the years is that the young ones, who you saw in the pews this morning, and then they did collect the change, and then they went off, we see them every single week. The youth group we see once a year. They do a service once a year, and otherwise it feels like they're mostly invisible to the rest of the congregation. And when they are visible, it's because somebody asked them to do something, to run the snack bar or to do some project. And they're happy to do that, and I think it's good for them to do that and to serve the community, certainly. But I'd like to see them, at least once in a while, more involved in the church so that they had more interaction with the rest of the congregation and the rest of the congregation had more interaction with them. And I know to get them here on Sunday morning might be a bit of a struggle, but once in a while maybe we could do it.
The question is, as a minister, what is the oddest request you have received for your services? And they're hoping for a story. First of all, I want to qualify services. All the ministers here are going, really? Yeah, okay. Excellent. We're not going there. Okay, I was asked once to do a renewal of vows, right, for a couple who had been married for, I'm guessing, 5 years. But here's the hitch, they were professional clowns. And so I had to agree to do the wedding in clown. And there's a picture somewhere of me in a very large rainbow-colored wig, full clown face, that big clown shoes, robe, stole, everything, Reverend Bubba D. Clown. It was in a pavilion in the middle of a park, and there was a center aisle down the pavilion floor. One half of the pavilion were all of the people in clown that were seated. The other half were people who were not in clown were seated, right? And we did the renewal of vows, and so the bride comes down the aisle, also in full clown, and then about 20 seconds after she arrived at the front of the building, her train arrived via remote control car, speeding down the aisle, smacking into the front, running back and forth. We ended up going back to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Marietta for their reception, and they're in a convertible, sitting on the back seat of the convertible with this loop of balloons over them, and we're headed down the street. We're all behind them, honking, having a good time. Coming in the other direction was a couple that had just gotten married at the Catholic Church in a very, very proper horse and buggy, dressed to the T's. I mean, thousands of dollars were in that particular thing, coming straight down the street at us as the clown parade is going in the other direction. And all I can think of is, years from now, there's going to be this conversation that takes place where one of them is going to look at the other and say it was all the clown's fault, right? It didn't work because we were passed by clowns. So that was kind of the oddest thing that I've been asked to do. It was also one of the most fun experiences that I've had as a renewal of vows goes. Being with like-minded people, you often say it's not so, but we are not all like-minded. Can you elaborate? Yes. I think it is an absolute mistake to talk about Unitarian Universalists as like-minded. I have not yet met two Universalists that totally agreed on everything. I often refer to Unitarian Universalists as like-hearted. And part of the reason that I do that is I think that is much more accurate description of who we are as a tradition. I think as a tradition, what we say is we are, and Barry, you correct me if I'm wrong because you're the one who helped frame this one year, we are a congregation of one faith and many beliefs, right? It is not that we have to agree with each other, it is that we have to learn how to treat each other in the world in similar ways. We have to learn how to support each other and support others. So like-hearted makes all the more sense to me than like-minded. If we were like-minded, I would have no preaching obligation whatsoever, right? I think it's important for us to recognize we have differences and sometimes significant differences, and that's really what helps us grow is when we encounter those in meaningful ways. Here.
I grew up Unitarian, and the church I grew up with would say, and it sounds negative, but it really isn't, based on what the Reverend said, divided we stand, united we fall.
What is my favorite quotation? Lord. Well, I will say, in terms of Unitarian Universalism, one of my favorite quotations is Thomas Starr King, who was a Unitarian and Universalist minister during the period of the Civil War and is credited with saving California for the Union, interestingly enough. He spent a lot of his time campaigning for California to remain in the Union during the Civil War. He was once quoted as saying, Unitarians believe they are too good to be damned by God, and Universalists believe that God is too good to damn them. And the reason that that's important to me is that I think that it captures the essence of what is unique about Unitarian Universalism, and that is the confluence of human and divine goodness. The ability for us to recognize that so much of the theologies that we struggle with are theologies that are fundamentally based on human depravity, right? Human sinfulness. And what we do as Unitarian Universalists is turn that on its head and say, no, part of what's really important and special and unique about about people, humanity, is the capacity that we have for goodness. And I will challenge any of my colleagues who want to go to the Bible and concentrate on sinfulness to point to where Jesus spent most of his energy talking about the sinfulness of other people, because that's not what the message is for early Christianity.
Sharon?
Yeah.
I just want you to know there is one question online.
Let's do it. Hold on.
I want to give you they asked the opportunity, it's a long question, so I said I'd let you take a look at it first.
So I grew up in a non-denominational charismatic church. I've since had to deconstruct a lot of what I believed and find that I am in the ruins and rumble of a faith that I cannot completely call Christianity anymore. I can't unsee that what I've witnessed spiritually, so I don't fit with the atheist belief system, but not quite the ambiguous agnostic system either. I have believed in divinity, whether that's the mother and father or spirit that is common through all of us. Do I need to have a more specific belief system to build and establish community people to do with, like I used to have in my Christian groups? I'm 33 with no kids, not married. Feel like it's important to mention because I think people my age who have gone through deconstruction tend to feel kind of lost. Do I need to have something more particular than that? No, that's a great starting point, right? And I will just simply relay a very short story. I think that most of us find ourselves at that place at some point in our life. Like I don't know where to go. What's happened to me isn't working. I don't necessarily feel anything's forming in front of me. I had one of those moments the first time I was asked to preach somewhere, right? Called my dad, who had been preaching for 30 years, right, and said, "Dad, I'm supposed to write this sermon. It's tomorrow. Nothing's coming to mind." He's like, "Great, write your sermon." Right? He said, No, you don't understand. A blank slate is a great place to begin, right? And this is not completely a blank slate. Let me say that very clearly. This is someone who's carrying a great deal of stuff. The question is whether or not you're carrying the stuff or the stuff is carrying you, right? Your ability to recognize that you've been impacted by theological systems, spiritual systems that have not been meaningful, right, is an important awareness. Now the question is, can you be courageous enough to sit in the stillness of that emptiness and find those things that are going to fill you that are meaningful, right? And the problem in Unitarian Universalism is we're not going to give it to you, right? We're not going to tell you this is what you should be filled with, right? We're going to invite you to consider the various ways in which you are filled and hope that that finds meaning for you. How do you find compassion for leaders who you feel are leading us astray and their followers, your family? So, compassion, right? The co-suffering. I think that the answer to the question is found in the word compassion. When you encounter someone who is experiencing and declaring themselves in the world vastly different than you are, part of what you're looking for is what motivates them. And recognizing that there's pain involved, there's all kinds of things involved, there's grasping for meaning involved. You can have appreciation for that without having to agree with someone. Right? You can understand why someone is fearful without having to engage that fear. And at the same time, you can stand with people and give them the opportunity to recognize that they're not necessarily going to be abandoned just because they're different than you are. I've had this experience over and over and over again in the community with people. You know, I'm some people's favorite pagan, I'm some people's favorite liberal, I'm some people, partly because I'm like, okay, I hear you, now what? Right? So we're different. Okay. What are we going to do with that? You and I still love the people around us. We're still putting our lives on the line for people around us. Okay, so we have differences. And what are we going to do with that? And I think that's the step that we often miss, is we encounter the difference and we go, uh-oh, nope, I countered the difference and I'm like, tell me more. I want to know more about you and what's going on in you. And I want you to understand where I'm coming from, right? But it is first to be curious about someone, right? To seek to understand and only then to be understood, right? Says St. Francis. Who's got another one of my...
My question is, how do you describe this church to someone who is unfamiliar with us? So I've been, asked to do this a couple of times, and so I start out with three things. It's a place of acceptance and lack of judgment. And what I mean by that is you can walk through the door for the first time and people aren't going to look you up and down. And that's very important to me. People who understand the causes of inequality and its pervasiveness in our social structure. And then I gleefully say, and some of you may not appreciate this, and I mean no disrespect, they are converted sociologists to begin with. I'm a sociologist, so that's high praise for me. But anyway, I hope I didn't offend anybody. And then third, there is a shared commitment, of course, to social justice. So it's those three things, and then usually people have questions and things. So. And sometimes I say to my friends at Clark, it's just like a group of Clarkies. Oh, no.
Getting the microphone back from a professor is a hazardous test. What are you going to do for your 60th birthday? Oh, Lord. Take a nap. Might be worth it. We're not doing that? Oh, we're not doing 60th birthday. That's my wife, because she turns 60 before I do. A little secret. Older women, So, NARC, yes. I don't know yet. That's an interesting question. We have talked, I did broach the subject actually when we turned 59 about having some kind of combined bash, so we may have to figure that out. Where do you think life would have taken you if you hadn't become a UU Reverend? Well, those of you who know some of my story know that I began my studies in medicine. And so I suspect that if I hadn't become a UU Reverend, I would be either a doctor or a nurse, and I would probably be doing trauma work in an ER or out in the field somewhere. I'm too hefty to be a flight nurse, but, I can figure that out. Let's see here. How many books have you agreed to donate this year? How many books has your wife allowed into the house? Yeah, this year? I will have a few boxes of donated books, I agree. But I'm learning how to use my Kindle more and more, so there's no way of actually knowing just how many books I have. Although I did get one yesterday. I bought the first volume of the Martin Gilbert's 3-volume history of the 19th century. I had found the other 2 volumes at the Paxton Library at their book sale. And, so here's the woman who says, no more books, right? And then she says, I've got to go up to the Paxton Library book sale. I'm like, what? Really? It's like taking the mouse into the cheese factory, thank you very much. And by the way, not all the books we brought home were mine. So, no, that's true. What are you hopeful for in 2026, personally in the world and within the UUA? I want us to protect people's health care, right? I want us to protect, and I think that within the UUA, I want congregations to find the sweet spot of their missions. Like I said, we really do thrive in ways that other congregations wish at this moment, and so I wish that for each congregation, but I'm really, really, really concerned about health care in this country and in the world. Let's see. If Jesus is God's only son and we're all children of God, does that make me a daughter? It could, if you want to be. I think the issue theologically, and I have said this many times, I think we're all children of the divine, right? That Jesus, if you read the scriptures, Jesus did not say, I am the only, right? And the people point to John, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Lord except through me, right? Which is an absolute misinterpretation of what was originally spoken in the original language, which is talking about a way of being in the world, as opposed to a personal testimony about personal who one is as an individual. It's about, I'm showing you a way of being in the world, and if you want to come into this way of being, you're capable of doing that. What is God's plan behind addiction? I don't think that God has a plan behind addiction. I think addiction is a biological reality, a disease process like so many other disease processes. To say that there is a plan behind addiction is to say there's a plan behind cancer. All right? There's a plan behind heart disease. And I don't think there are plans behind those. I think that we are biological beings and we are susceptible to diseases. And if there is any divineness in this, it is our capacity to confront those realities, to draw people close to us, to find meaning throughout the process of addressing those realities, so that we are not defined by the diseases that affect us, but we define those diseases in their relationship to us. If that makes any sense? Not a question, but looking for advice on how to comfort someone who is dying. Listen. Listen. Invite them to tell their story as they desire. Invite them to communicate their needs. Invite them to say what they need to say to you and to anyone else. Just simply be. Part of the hardest part of being a minister and learning ministry is learning how to sit with someone who is grieving or dying, and recognizing that sometimes silence itself is holy. The ability for any one of us to just simply be present with someone who's in that state is a powerful testament to the way we can be compassionate with each other. And if you need more support for that, please do reach out. There are at least 3 of us here that have experience in that. Yeah. All right, hold on.
Does UU offer online courses on Unitarian history, principles, etc.?
So we do have one online course that is up right now, which is elevator speech for those of you who want to figure out a quick way to describe yourselves to others. That's available, and I think we're in process of having a new U course that will be online as well. I struggle with the online versus in-person because I think there's a lot of kind of going back and forth. There are a lot of people right now who want to be in person, but I'm also aware of so many people who can't be in person for one reason or another, and who are still confronting the realities of COVID or who are at a distance. So I want to be able to provide opportunities for both to occur. So we have done UU history in the past. Long Strange Trip is one of the wonderful experiences that we've had, which is a video-based course on our history. UU theology we've done in the past, we can do again. So, what does it mean to live a good life? And how do we pursue a good life without guilt when our capacity is limited, when we are just trying to get through the week, when we see all that is hard, bad in the world? I think that Buddhism is the thing that has taught me most about this, which is if I can learn to simply be in the moment and experience the moment with joy and not project myself out into the future and not cast my thoughts way out into what's happening in the world, if I can do that for a few minutes each day, right, and ground myself in a reality that isn't based in all of the stuff that's going on in the world, recognizing that suffering is, right, without having to take that suffering on, right, and be with myself. So in my house, for me, walking out of my house, especially in the springtime, we have a wonderful old wild cherry tree that blossoms, white blossoms, and I sort of feel like Alice Walker. If I pass a field of purple and I don't notice it, then God gets angry, right? If I pass that tree without stopping and just sort of taking in those blossoms, I mean, what am I doing? And I think if we can ground ourselves in those realities that give us peace and joy in ways that allow us to carry that into other parts of our lives and with other people, especially as we encounter a suffering world, it can be very helpful. What am I reading? Well, note cards. I am reading a number of things. This year I was very taken by the book Undocumented, a history of how immigration became illegal. I also read a piece, and I'm trying to remember the author's name, Illiberal History. It was a history of conservatism, essentially, illiberalism in the United States. That was very meaningful. And a host of other things that I'm sort of not coming to mind with, but I should put out a list for those of you who are interested in the things that have affected me this year. Who's got my fourth question? Two more, okay. What time is it?
Should I make it brief? Should I make it brief?
Go ahead.
The question is, what do you look forward to in 2026? And I started thinking, better relations with my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law. And I'm thinking, now this is coming from the minister. He probably wants, what do I look forward to for the church? So
no, I left it wide open, so you go with where you want.
I'm going to do the church one now. I look forward to this congregation flexing its muscle in the city of Worcester and environs in terms of climate change and in terms of staying out of other countries' business. And January 6th, since I got the microphone, day after tomorrow at Elm Park, corner Park Ave and Highland Street, there's going to be a commemoration 5 years since January 6th.
Thank you. I got three more questions, then one more here. Tell me why the stars do shine. Tell me why the ivy twines. Tell me why the sky's so blue. And then I'll tell you I love you. Right? In what ways do you see opportunities for innovation, experimentation on Sunday morning? What are the barriers to the innovation? And so part of what we're going to need to do is expand the number of people who know our technology systems. It's remarkable that we've been able to sustain ourselves with only 2 people who are trained to use our systems. So part of the innovation is we have the capacity that if people who are joining us online wanted to be a worship associate, we could just throw them up on the screen and we can hear them in here. But we need to have some more trained people and opportunities for that to occur. I think that the innovation on Sunday morning has to do with the fact that we have so many different musicians that have come into the congregation, musical possibilities, so many opportunities for us to involve people in other places. For the first time, we've had people that have joined the congregation who have not yet been in the sanctuary, and that's really meaningful and important. So ways that we can continue to grow the congregation beyond its physical boundaries seems to me really important. And how does the crucifixion of Jesus translate into Christians being absolved of their sins according to Christian faith? What can we, the congregation, do to help you meet your aspirations for our community? So we're talking about the theory of atonement. We talk about the idea that Jesus dying on the cross exculpated people's sins. And it is one of the primary critiques that Unitarians and Universalists have had of more conservative Christianity over the years. I carry the notion within me that what happened to Jesus was the supreme example of nonviolent intervention. And that is what happened to Jesus, what happens to anyone whose demise is a matter of public record, especially at the hands of such dominant entity, is that at its core it becomes a critique of that act of domination. And what I think is important about the story of Jesus involved in this is that it made at its best, it makes state-sponsored death illegitimate. Right? At its worst, it becomes an opportunity for people to continue to sacrifice themselves on behalf of the state. Right? And so I think for me personally, the theology, there is no theology of crucifixion, there is a theology of courage in the face of crucifying forces, in order that we might be able to critique the illegitimacy of those forces that wish to crucify. Who's got my last question? Sherry.
And the last question, what gives meaning to you? And I have to say, when I read that, it kind of sparked another question that I had been asked before, and it was the question of, do you make a difference? Do you make a big difference? And my answer to that question was like, no, I don't make a big difference. I think what gives meaning to each and every one of us is our choice. And I choose to believe in simple and good and decent, loving humans. And that's what gives everything meaning.
Welcome.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're just crossing our path, either new to this congregation or curious about Unitarian Universalism, check out our website, uucworcester.org. You'll find lots of information there about our beliefs, the 8 guiding principles, religious exploration for children and adults, our social action initiatives, and the many groups we offer to help people connect and have fun. And consider joining us in person or online on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. We'd love to meet you.